The night Taiwan stopped breathing began with a siren that sliced through the sky like a silver blade. Neon lights flickered, scooters froze at the intersections, and the breeze carried whispers that seemed to rhyme with every rumor that had ever haunted Yu Menglong's name. As the clouds rolled low and heavy like a curtain about to rise, the city felt it, the shift, the twist, the moment destiny inhaled sharply. Inside a dimly lit alley in Taipei's Zhongxing district, where old lanterns swayed like trembling secrets, officers surrounded a building whose windows glowed an eerie violet. The glow pulsed, timed with a fear that had a heartbeat of its own. The citizens watching from afar didn't know what the police were there for, but deep inside, every instinct told them the same thing. Tonight would rhyme with disaster. Tonight would echo with truth. And then, in one sudden motion, as synchronized as the final note of a tragic opera, the doors burst open. Out walked a man with cuffs around his wrists, his head lowered, his breath shallow, but the resemblance was unmistakable. It was him, Yu Menglong's manager, the man who had vanished when the storm first broke, the man whose silence had shadowed every headline, the man who the fans whispered about with voices shaking like loose glass. His face looked as though it had been sculpted from exhaustion, pale, bruised in fear, dripping with guilt like dew on a blade. Flashlights circled him, camera shutters clapped like thunder, and even the officers escorting him couldn't hide the tremor in their hands. Because they knew, everybody knew, this arrest was not just another arrest. It was the missing piece in a puzzle written in blood and whispers. As reporters swarmed the scene, the air transformed into a battlefield of questions. Microphones lunged forward. Phones blinked like constellations. The manager's eyes darted left and right, as if searching for an escape route, not from the police, but from the truth that was finally catching up to him. Then came the moment that would replay on every screen, every timeline, every corner of the internet where fans huddled together like families trying to survive a storm. A journalist shouted, "Is it true? Did you confess?" The manager looked up, and the city fell silent. His lips trembled, and with that tremble, destiny leaned closer. I told them everything," he whispered, his voice cracking like thin ice. "It's worse than anyone thinks." And just like that, Taipei's heartbeat stopped. The confession. The terrifying confession. The one hint the authorities had refused to reveal. The world had waited, pacing through sleepless nights, scrolling through endless theories, connecting dots that kept returning to one shadow, him. But nobody expected the scenes that unfolded next. The police van pulled away, yet the echo of his words remained suspended in the air, as if gravity itself refused to let them fall. Taiwan trembled. Fans gasped. The news anchors almost lost their voices trying to keep up. And while the city tried to regain its rhythm, inside the police headquarters, a storm brewed behind closed steel doors. Under interrogation lights blinding enough to expose every lie, the manager sat with his hands trembling uncontrollably. The officers flipped through documents and photographs that seemed to glow with accusation. "Start from the beginning," the lead investigator demanded. "And don't leave anything out. We already know pieces. We need the whole picture." The manager took a breath so deep it trembled through his entire body. And then he spoke, slowly, painfully, like someone dragging confession from the deepest corner of a haunted memory. His words wove a story thicker than fog, darker than rumor, and heavier than the grief that had been crushing Yu Menglong's fanbase since day one. He talked about secret meetings in rooftop bars where the music thumped like hidden threats. He talked about unsigned contracts, about promises exchanged under flickering lantern light, about voices that whispered like ghosts in phone static. He spoke of nights where Yu Menglong looked over his shoulder too many times, where he sensed footsteps behind him, where he felt watched even in silence. And as he unraveled each thread, the investigators felt the room shrinking, the air thinning, the truth sharpening. But then came the moment that would later define everything, the moment that turned the interrogation room into a vault of horror. The manager leaned forward. His eyes glistened with the kind of fear that doesn't just belong to guilt, but to something so much bigger, so much darker. "There is something I hid," he said, voice barely audible. "Something I never told the public or the family." The room froze. On the night everything happened, I wasn't just nearby. The officers exchanged looks. "I was there," he whispered. "I saw something I wasn't supposed to see." The investigator pressed closer. "What did you see?" The manager swallowed, his throat visibly tightening. "A man," he said. "A man I recognized. Someone Menglong feared. Someone he told me never to mention." His breath hitched. He wasn't alone. And Menglong, he looked terrified, like he knew his fate was sealed. Gasps erupted in the room. But he wasn't finished. "And when I tried to intervene, when I tried to call for help, they threatened me. They told me if I spoke, I'd end up just like him. So I ran. I left him. I left him there." His voice cracked. Tears slid down his face. "That's what's been eating me alive," he whispered. "That's why I confessed. Because the truth won't let me sleep anymore. And the world deserves to know." The weight of those words pressed down on the room like a collapsing ceiling. Officers exchanged horrified glances. One scribbled notes with shaking hands, another clenched his jaw so tight the sound echoed. But the manager wasn't done. "Everything I hid, everything I kept quiet, it all rhymes with what the fans suspected. They weren't wrong. They felt the darkness before anyone else did." That sentence sent chills through the room, because it linked perfectly with the ripple of theories fans had woven like a tapestry across social media. The confession continued. He described underground circles where reputations were currency and threats were entertainment. He described voices in the dark, faces hidden behind tinted glass, and conversations that ended too suddenly to be harmless. And the investigators, despite years of hardened experience, felt goosebumps rise with every detail, because every sentence rhymed with a darker past, a darker pattern, a darker truth they didn't dare predict. Hours passed. The manager kept talking. The truth kept unraveling. And Taiwan, though unaware of every detail, felt the earthquake of revelation. Outside the building, fans gathered with candles that flickered like tiny beating hearts. They held posters, photographs, bracelets, and handwritten notes that shimmered with tears. The night had grown colder, and yet the crowd thickened, because they knew this was not just a case. It was not just a scandal. It was a turning point, a moment that would rewrite everything. A moment that rhymed with destiny. A moment that carried the weight of justice. As dawn crept over Taipei, staining the sky with lavender and gold, the investigators stepped out of the room with expressions drained of color. Reporters surged toward them like a wave. Is the confession real? Is the case reopening? What did he reveal? Is there another suspect? But the lead investigator said only one haunting sentence. The truth is bigger than anyone imagined. That line alone shook the globe. Within minutes, hashtags exploded. Hashtag Justice for Menglong, hashtag Taiwan Arrest Shock, hashtag Manager Confession, hashtag Truth at Last. Taipei had never felt so haunted. The morning after the arrest, sunlight tried to pierce the city, but even the sun seemed shaken, flickering through the clouds like a trembling witness. Everywhere you looked, from the metro stations to the street markets, conversations were frozen mid-sentence, all orbiting around one event, one name, one confession that seemed too terrifying to belong to real life. Yu Menglong's manager. Finally caught. Finally cracked. Finally confessing. But while the world replayed the arrest footage, one detail most people missed was the moment just before he was shoved into the police van, the moment his eyes met the crowd. For a split second, his expression wasn't guilt. It wasn't regret. It was fear. Raw, breath-stealing fear. And that fear began the next chapter. Inside the cold interrogation room, the manager sat hunched forward, fingers tapping erratically against the metal table as if he were sending a secret code into the air. The officers exchanged glances. Every tap seemed intentional, rhythmic, almost like a warning. "Speak," the investigator ordered. "You've already confessed. Now explain." The manager inhaled sharply, the breath shaky and broken. "You don't understand," he whispered. Confessing was easy. Explaining, that's where the danger begins. That line alone rippled through the station like a silent earthquake. Officers watching from behind the observation glass felt goosebumps shiver across their arms. Something about the way he said danger felt different, heavier, as if it carried teeth. The lead investigator leaned in. What we don't understand, you're going to make us understand. For a long moment, the manager didn't speak. Instead, he stared at the blank wall, as if replaying a nightmare only he could see. The room's fluorescent lights flickered, humming like an omen. And then he began. It started months before Menglong died, he said. He knew someone was after him. The room stilled. He didn't say who. He never said names. But he kept repeating the same sentence over and over like a curse that wouldn't let him breathe. The investigator raised a brow. What sentence? The manager's voice cracked as he quoted it. They are coming. The investigator felt a chill creep up his spine. Who is they? That's the problem, the manager whispered. I don't know, but I saw them. The officers leaned closer. He described a night in Kaohsiung, just weeks before the tragedy, a night where the sea wind carried a strange, metallic smell and the streets were empty despite a festival nearby. He and Menglong had just finished a private meeting when they noticed a black vehicle parked under a flickering street lamp. The windows were tinted too dark. The engine was too quiet. Menglong froze. His hands trembled. His eyes swirled with a fear so deep it seemed older than the night itself. What is it? The manager asked him. But Menglong didn't answer. Instead, he whispered that same chilling line. They're here. The manager admitted that he brushed it off at the time, assuming it was just stress or paranoia, but now he knows better. The same car followed us 3 times, he said. Different cities. Different days. Same license plate. The officers stiffened. Before they could question him further, the lights in the room flickered again, this time sharper, longer, as if someone had sliced the electricity. The manager jolted violently, squeezing his eyes shut. They know I talked, he whispered. They always know. For the first time since the interrogation began, one of the officers stepped back with genuine unease. But the investigator pressed on. Continue. Tell us what happened on that night. The manager's breath trembled like a shivering violin string. The night Yu Menglong died. I wasn't supposed to be near him, but he called me. He sounded broken. He said he needed to meet. Said something had gone too far. He paused, swallowing hard. When I got there, he wasn't alone. The room fell silent. There were 2 men, he said. One standing behind him, one blocking the exit. And Menglong looked like he had been crying, not from sadness, from fear. The manager squeezed his fists until his knuckles went white. When I tried to approach, the one blocking the exit stepped toward me. He said if I made a sound, if I took 1 step closer, I'd be next. Officers exchanged alarmed glances. And then, the investigator asked quietly. The manager's voice was barely a whisper now. And then Menglong looked at me with the most desperate, pleading eyes I've ever seen in my entire life. He blinked rapidly, fighting tears. He mouthed 1 word to me. 1 word that has haunted me every time I close my eyes. The investigator leaned closer. What word? Run. Silence suffocated the room. The manager's face twisted in agony. So I ran. I ran because I was terrified. I ran because I'm a coward. I ran because I thought I could get help, but by the time I returned, everything was over. He lifted his head, eyes red. That's why I confessed. Because I left him. And because those men, they weren't strangers. Menglong knew them. And now that I've spoken, they'll come for me too. The investigator exhaled slowly, processing the revelation. But before he could speak again, a loud crash erupted in the hallway, followed by panicked voices. Officers sprinted down the corridor. The manager jerked upright, fear stabbing through his body. What's happening? He asked. The lead investigator stood, jaw clenched. We're checking it out. But deep inside, he already knew. Whatever was coming, whatever had been lurking in Menglong's shadow, whatever had followed him through cities and festivals and silent nights, It wasn't finished. And now that the confession had been spoken, the storm was shifting. Outside, thunder rolled, even though the sky was clear. Inside, the air thickened with dread. And the manager whispered the final line that closed the scene like a door slamming shut. "This is only the beginning."